Hello, my name is Gokey Gamer, coach of the Milwaukee Medichams, and this is log number 2 of testing the power of these Paradox Pokemon for Professor Turo. I have been recruited by the professor to help gather intel on these iron Pokemon by battling with them in the Soul Dew Association, and in exchange I have been promised a championship title as these Pokemon are just that powerful. Our week 2 opponent is none other than Coach Pommes and the Austria Accelgors. This will be the very first time we're battling each other, and not gonna lie, this team looks quite threatening. Pommes has access to the Pokemon Garchomp, Heatran, Reuniclus, Jolteon, Quaquaval, Sylveon, Thundurus Incarnate, Overqwil, Hisuian Typhlosion, Toedscruel, and finally a Cutiefly. His Tera captains consist of Jolteon having access to the Tera Fairy, Grass, and Ice types, Hisuian Typhlosion with the Tera Fire, Grass, and Fighting types, and finally Cutiefly with the Tera Ground, Fire, and Steel types. This team has many massive threats like the overall bulky tanks Heatran, Overqwil, and Reuniclus, major offensive threats like Thundurus, Quaquaval, and Garchomp, and Jolteon and Hisuian Typhlosion make for some very threatening Tera captains. In terms of what I'm predicting my opponent to bring, I'm mainly predicting the Heatran, Tera Grass, Jolteon, Thundurus, Overqwil, Sylveon, and possibly something like Garchomp, Reuniclus, or Tera Grass, Hisuian Typhlosion to round things out. Overall, a very scary team, but I think there's some weaknesses in it that I'll be able to exploit. So now, allow me to log in the Pokemon that I'm bringing and why I'm bringing them this week. The first Pokemon I'm bringing is once again, to absolutely nobody's surprise, Iron Valiant. This week they're holding the choice specs with max special attack and enough speed to outspeed everything minus Jolteon and his Scarfed Pokemon, and we've got the moves Moonblast, Aura Sphere, Shadow Ball, and Icy Wind. Very similar to last week, I deal super effective damage against everything my opponent wants to throw at me, minus a couple of Pokemon such as Sylveon and Overqwil, so hopefully the choice specs will allow first class to claim a few lives this week. Our second Pokemon that we're bringing in is the return of the major threat that is Iron Thorns. A bit more offensive this week, we've got the moves Wild Charge, Earthquake, Dragon Dance, and Ice Punch with the Shuka Berry to help tank hits against ground types, max attack, and enough speed to outspeed everything minus Jolteon and Choice Scarves at +1. And Tera Electric to absolutely nuke something that would otherwise be able to tank a hit decently well. Considering the only Pokemon that can absorb a Wild Charge are 2 Pokemon that are quad weak to an Ice Punch and a very frail Jolteon, I think Mechagodzilla has what it takes to once again get sent in and claim lives before ultimately going down. After Iron Thorns is yet another Pokemon that has a great chance to claim lives this week, King the Weavile. This week our moveset is Knock Off, Icicle Crash, Swords Dance, and Dig to round things out. This is also why King is holding the Power Herb this week to catch the Heatran by surprise to hopefully nuke it after setting up to +2. Despite the fact that King has an adamant nature this week, we actually do outspeed everything that isn't Scarfed or Jolteon. Hopefully King will prove to either be a really fast chipper or even possibly a devastating endgame sweeper. After King is 3 new Pokemon that we're bringing for the very first time. The first Pokemon that'll be showing up that surprisingly has a pretty good matchup into my opponent is Professor Turo, Security, and Janitor, the Hive Mind Mousehold. This week we've got the moves Population Bomb, Play Rough, Tidy Up, and Dig as our moveset, with the Wide Lens as our item so we have as little chance as possible of missing our Population Bombs or Play Roughs. With max attack and max speed, like everything else, say it with me, we'll outspeed everything that isn't Scarfed or Jolteon. But if we click Tidy Up even once, we will be the fastest thing on the field minus a Scarf or Quick Feet Jolteon. Combining a +1 attack and speed with Technician and Population Bomb, especially with only one Ghost type that loses that type if it Teras, means that Mousehold can easily spam Population Bomb against my opponent's entire team. I just have to be careful about Flame Body Heatran, Rough Skin Garchomp, and Rocky Helmet, but other than that, I really do think the Hive Mind looks quite nice here. Now considering we could use a wall here to help out against threats like Garchomp, Heatran, and particularly Quaquaval, I decide to bring Derp the Quagsire as my next Pokemon. Having the Rocky Helmet and the ability Unaware with max HP and defense makes this a very hard Pokemon for my opponent to KO, particularly with the moves Earth Power, Ice Beam, Recover, and Amnesia. If my opponent doesn't bring a Pokemon with Toxic or Toxic Spikes, then there's a really good chance that this Pokemon can just wall my opponent's team and put a stop to their own setup potential, and that's what Derp's whole role is this week. Be the wall to help our other threats win the game. And finally, the last Pokemon that we'll be bringing is none other than Iron Crown. Holding the leftovers this week, I'm hoping that Titanium's natural bulk will come in handy this week and also deal a crap ton of damage with the moves Tachyon Cutter, Steel Beam, Calm Mind, and Volt Switch, with enough speed to outspeed Typhlosion. The role of Titanium this week is to be a chipper, hopefully able to pivot around enough with Volt Switch to weaken things down and allow other major threats to come in and claim lives. I truly do hope that Iron Crown doesn't disappoint. But considering how successful the other 3 Ironmons were last week, I do have decently high hopes for Titanium this week. And that is the complete team we're bringing for this match. Obviously our goal is to gather more information about these rare iron Pokemon for the Professor, but if we could grab a win here and continue our winning streak, not gonna lie, that would feel pretty freaking good. With that being said, I will now get ready for this match. This is the end of the team preview, now let's get into the battle. Once I log into the game, I notice my opponent's team is more or less what I predicted, with the only exception being Quaquaval. I have to be extremely careful of a Quaquaval or Jolteon endgame because both Pokemon could be quite deadly if their counters go down too early. I do take this opportunity to notice that my opponent really doesn't have a great lead against the Choice Specs Iron Valiant, and since First Class didn't even hit the field last week, I decided to give them a treat and have them lead this game as my opponent leads with their Garchomp. This leads to an interesting situation. I can pretty much tank any hit this Garchomp wants to throw at me if it's Scarfed, and if it's not Scarfed, then I outspeed and can easily pick up the KO with a Moonblast or Icy Wind. However, I assume that my opponent isn't going to want their heavy hitter to go down immediately turn 1 in this game, so I opt to instead go for an Aura Sphere, predicting a possible Heatran switch since it quad resists both Moonblast and Icy Wind. And while my opponent does end up switching out, unfortunately it ends up being their Overqwil that ends up coming in and revealing the Intimidate. Aura Sphere does quite a decent chunk, as well as revealing that my opponent most likely has the Assault Vest and has a lot of HP investment, so unfortunately Aura Sphere isn't a 2-shot. As a result, during my next turn I opt to switch it to Titanium, the Iron Crown, as my opponent actually doubles down into Reuniclus, most likely realizing that I'm choice locked based on how much damage I did. After debating about what my next move should be, I then decide to see the extent of how much damage Iron Crown can do and go for a Tachyon Cutter, which does a decent chunk of Reuniclus's HP, and they reveal that they have Trick Room. This was not something accounted for during the preparations of this game. Realizing that I could be in a bit of trouble, I decided to try going for a Volt Switch to get some chip off and switch into something that could hopefully tank this incoming hit better to help stall out the Trick Room. Okay, so this just got a whole lot worse. Apparently this turn of events took the professor by surprise, as Iron Crown was calculated to have been able to live this crit 100% of the time, even if this is a modest max special attack Reuniclus. However, this Reuniclus is running some hidden tech. You see, Reuniclus can get the ability Magic Guard, which grants him the ability to only take damage from direct attacks, meaning if you opt to poison or burn him, then he won't take any chip damage. The same also applies to the Life Orb, an item that normally boosts your attack by 1.3 times, but you sacrifice 10% of your HP each turn you attack. But because of Magic Guard, Reuniclus doesn't have to worry about losing 10% of their HP every turn, suddenly making them a lot more powerful. However, not even that is enough. The only way this crit could be a guaranteed one-shot is if this Reuniclus is modest max special attack, and it's a roll if Reuniclus doesn't have max special attack or isn't modest. Basically meaning that unless this Reuniclus is as maxed out as possible on special attack, this crit was still a roll even with the added boost from Life Orb. Long story short, Iron Crown was unfortunately robbed. Not a great first showing from this legendary futuristic Pokemon, and especially not a great look for us. Admittedly, being a bit shaken up after witnessing a brutal death in front of me, I opt to send in my dedicated wall, Derp the Quagsire. During the first turn, I decide to set up an Amnesia, hoping I can tank a hit and just recover the rest of the Trick Room turns away. Well, that's unfortunate. As a result, the +2 special defense boost isn't enough to keep me alive, and Derp just falls as fast as he came in. All of a sudden, the Quaquaval endgame looks quite a bit scarier. The good news is, this actually gives me a free switch into Mechagodzilla, as not only can I tank a hit after I tear into my electric type, I can freely set up a Dragon Dance, as after this turn, Trick Room ends, and I can freely nuke something with Wild Charge. Even Garchomp doesn't want to come in against this major threat, as we've got the move Ice Punch. Thankfully, my opponent decides to let this major threat known as Reuniclus go down, and then the Overqwil comes back in, getting off another Intimidate to put us back at neutral attack. Thankfully, Earthquake can still KO at this range, even after an Intimidate, meaning that Mechagodzilla claims 2 lives and puts us back in a more favorable position. Garchomp ends up coming back in, and thankfully Ice Punch will actually be able to pick up the KO here too, so we simply fire off an Ice Punch, and since Garchomp isn't Scarfed, we do manage to pick up the KO, leaving our opponent with just 3 Pokemon left. Unfortunately, however, this does end Mechagodzilla's rampage, as while Ice Punch doesn't cause recoil damage like Wild Charge, Garchomp does have the ability Rough Skin, which causes chip damage on contact, and that chip is enough to cause Iron Thorns to finally fall, putting us both at 3 Pokemon strong. While Iron Thorns does end up fainting once again, they really have shown in just these first 2 weeks how overpowered they can be, and I for one definitely enjoy having it on my team. This leaves me with 3 offensive threats, being Maushold, Iron Valiant, and Weavile, and my opponent with 2 offensive threats being Quaquaval and a Jolteon that can still Tera, as well as a defensive threat being Heatran. Because of Heatran being there and at full HP, I can't send an Iron Valiant to endgame sweep quite yet, and Weavile can't reliably set up a Swords Dance against any Pokemon on my opponent's team. So I decide to actually send in High Hive Mind the Mousehold as my opponent sends in Heatran, definitely the worst out of the 3 options. Believe it or not, Hive Mind can actually one-shot both Quaquaval and Jolteon with a Population Bomb, so had my opponent sent one of them out, then that would have been another free KO. Because Heatran ended up hitting the field, I opted to go for the surprise dig, as Jolteon would take way too much damage on the switch-in, and we outspeed Quaquaval and can punish that switch back with a Population Bomb. And my opponent ends up going for a Will-O-Wisp, which is certainly not ideal. The next turn we end up hitting the big lava monster with a massive dig. That unfortunately doesn't even do half HP. This reveals to us that this thing is definitely max HP and max defense, which is pretty annoying. On top of that, Heatran manages to land the Will-O-Wisp, burning us and having our attack. This endgame is starting to look a whole lot scarier. It's about this point that I realized that Quaquaval could very easily switch in here, predicting another dig, which would put me in an awful position. But surprisingly and fortunately, at +1 attack, we do still KO Quaquaval and Jolteon after the burn, meaning that as long as Heatran goes down, Hive Mind could legitimately just win us the rest of this game. I decide to risk taking heavy damage and go for the Tidy Up, predicting the Quaquaval to come in. And we actually go unpunished, as indeed the Dancing Duck ends up coming in, meaning that we can now pick up the KO with a Population Bomb. It's also revealed that thankfully Quaquaval doesn't have Aqua Jet, meaning that Hive Mind can outspeed and pick off Quaquaval without taking any damage from an attack. I guess this is why Hive Mind also functions as the Professor's security team. Well, that and the fact that they can communicate telepathically with each other. Yeesh. Creepy. This ends up bringing Heatran back in, and at this point my main goal is to weaken Heatran enough to where either Iron Valiant can come back in and sweep, or even have Hive Mind knock out Heatran before falling to the burn chip. After doing some calcs, I learned that Population Bomb at +1 is surprisingly a 2-shot versus this behemoth at this range, even if it is max HP and defense. So I go for the Pop Bomb and do a pretty decent chunk of damage, and Heatran fires off a Flash Cannon. Okay, not gonna lie, that was actually pretty cool. As a result, Hive Mind is able to actually pick up the KO against Heatran. Keep in mind, all of the damage to this max HP, max defense behemoth was from this family of mice, leaving Jolteon as the last Pokemon, meaning we've essentially got this battle in the bag. Or do we? When Jolteon comes in and actually goes for a Protect, as I go for a failed Pop Bomb, and that reveals Jolteon's held Flame Orb, meaning this thing has Quick Feet and now outspeeds my entire team. And depending on the Tera type of this Pokemon, Pommes could still win this game. Jolteon goes for a Thunderbolt now that it's faster than Hive Mind, which does end up defeating the Mouse family, leaving me with only Iron Valiant and Weavile left. If this Jolteon is Tera Electric, it will actually one-shot Iron Valiant, and it's a roll for it to KO Weavile. If it's Tera Grass, we will actually win as long as we don't get hacked to death. And if it's Tera Fairy, while it's not a guaranteed loss, there's a good chance that we lose before being able to even fire off an attack. I go for the Specs boosted Moonblast and pray that this Jolteon is in fact Tera Grass. And thankfully, my predictions were correct, as the reason this Jolteon didn't Tera was because it was a Tera Grass type. Iron Valiant lives the incoming Thunderbolt and doesn't get paralyzed, and we finish off the Electric Dog with our own Moonblast, barely winning us the battle with a 2-0 victory. Overall, certainly not our cleanest fight, but we will always take a win, and we get even more valuable info on our Iron Mons as well. While Iron Crown was unfortunately a major disappointment this week, Iron Thorns and even Iron Valiant to an extent was able to carry the team to victory alongside the help of Professor Turo's little security team. Needless to say that the Professor was extremely pleased to see the results of this battle as well, even validating how powerful his security team is. I must admit, I am surprised at how well this team is functioning, but I'm certainly not complaining. Perhaps we do have a very good chance of winning this entire league after all. Regardless, that will be the end of this vlog. If you're still watching, thank you so much for your support. If you guys enjoyed this battle and want to see more, then please leave a like, comment, and subscribe as it helps our research on these Iron Mons immensely. Be sure to check out our opponent Pommes and his side of the battle down below as well. Also be sure to check out some of our other Draft League content for more battles from me. If you want to show support financially and earn some unique perks, then be sure to check out my Ko-Fi link down below as well. With that, this is the end of the log. See you all next week for our Week 2 game. Peace out, mates. Yes, Professor, it appears you have really stumbled onto some extremely powerful Pokemon here. Yes, we are on our way back from the battlefield. We should reach there in approximately... Wait, what? Professor? Professor Turo! Oh no. It appears somebody has found us.